Hello everyone. Today let's talk about the humerus. Humerus is the longest bone in the upper limb. It has three parts, an upper end and the lower end, and in middle there is the shaft. The upper end is rounded and forms the head. The head lies in medially, backwards and upwards. There is the elevation which forms the anterior aspect of the upper end, which is called lesser tubercle, and there is also an elevation which is called the greater tubercle, and it forms the lateral aspect of the upper end. The line separating the head from the other parts of the upper end is called anatomical neck, and there is the surgical neck which separates the upper end from the shaft. There is a groove which is called the bicipital groove, and it separates the lesser tubercle and greater tubercle. Now let's talk about the border and surfaces of the humerus. The anterior border forms from the lateral lip of the bicipital groove and it continues down, and the lower part of the anterior border is rounded and smooth. The lateral border is formed by the lateral supracondylar ridge and it goes to the greater tubercle. The medial border is formed from the medial supracondylar ridge to the lesser tubercle. The anterolateral surface lies between the anterior border and the lateral border, where there is a V-shaped tuberosity. In the anterolateral surface there is V-shaped tuberosity. Anteromedial surface lies between the anterior border and medial border. Posterior surface lies between the lateral border and medial border. Now for the lower end, there are articular parts and non-articular parts. Here is a small head-shaped bony projection which is called the capitulum, which articulates with the head of the radius, and just beside the capitulum there is a pulley-shaped trochlea which accommodates the trochlear notch of the ulna. Now for the non-articular parts, there is a bony projection in the medial part which is called the medial epicondyle. Likewise, in the lateral side, there is also a bony projection but smaller than the medial epicondyle, which is called the lateral epicondyle. Just above the lateral epicondyle, there is a sharp margin which is called the lateral supracondylar ridge. Likewise, just above the medial epicondyle, there is a sharp margin which is called medial supracondylar ridge. There are three fosses in the lower end. Just above the trochlea of the anterior aspect, there is coronoid fossa which accommodates the coronoid process of the ulna when the elbow is flexed. Just above the capitulum, there is radial fossa which accommodates the head of the radius when the arm is flexed. And in the posterior aspect of the lower end, there is the olecranon fossa which accommodates the olecranon process of the ulna when the elbow is extended. Now let's talk about the attachment of the humerus. In the lesser tubercle, there is the insertion of the subscapularis muscle. In the greater tubercle, there are three impressions: upper impression, middle impression, and the lower impression. In the upper impression, there is the insertion of supraspinatus muscle. In the middle impression, there is insertion of infraspinatus muscle, and in the lowermost impression of the greater tubercle, there is the insertion of teres minor muscle. In the lateral lip of the bicipital groove, there is insertion of the pectoralis major muscle, and in the medial lip of the bicipital groove, there is insertion of the teres major muscle. In the floor of the bicipital groove, there is insertion of the latissimus dorsi muscle. The content of the bicipital grooves are the tendons of the long head of biceps brachii and the ascending branch of anterior circumflex humeral artery. In the anterolateral surface, there is a V-shaped tuberosity where there is the insertion of deltoid muscle, and in the middle part of the medial border, there is the insertion of coracobrachialis.